I was sitting in my kitchen on a Tuesday evening, eating leftover pasta straight out of the container when my phone rang from a number I didn't recognize. 3 years had passed since my divorce was finalized. 3 years of slowly rebuilding a life I thought I understood the ending of. I almost let it go to voicemail. I'm glad I didn't, even though that phone call would tear open every memory I had, carefully sealed shut. A woman's voice, shaky and unfamiliar at first, asked if I was Daniel. When I said yes, she introduced herself as Rachel, one of my ex-wife Melissa's college friends. I remembered the name vaguely from old photographs, faces from a life that felt like it belonged to someone else now. Rachel said she needed to tell me something, that she had carried it for years and couldn't sleep anymore without saying it out loud. My stomach tightened before she even continued. She said she was sorry, that she should have told me a long time ago, and that what she was about to say would probably change how I remembered my entire marriage. During the 6 years Melissa and I were married, she used to go on what she called girls' trips, 2 or 3 times a year. Napa Valley, a lake house in Michigan, a long weekend in Charleston. She'd come back tan and relaxed, phone full of pictures with her friends, laughing over brunch, hiking some trail, sitting by a bonfire. I traveled constantly for work back then, sometimes gone 2 weeks at a stretch, and I used to feel almost guilty that she never complained about it. I told my brother once that I was lucky to have a wife who had her own life, her own friendships, who didn't need me hovering over her every move. I told coworkers the same thing. I meant it. I believed it completely. Rachel's voice cracked when she said most of those trips were never girls' trips at all. She said Melissa had been seeing someone, a man she met through a work conference, and that the vacations I had smiled about, the ones I'd helped her pack for, the ones I'd waved her off to with a kiss at the door, were actually trips she took with him. Rachel said she and another friend, Jennifer, had covered for her the entire time. Whenever I called and asked where Melissa was, they'd answer for her, or text me photos from old albums, or back up whatever story she'd told me that week. She said it started small, one lie to help a friend, and then it became a routine none of them knew how to stop. I didn't say anything for a long moment. I just sat there with my fork still in the pasta container, listening to my own breathing. Rachel apologized again and again, said she understood if I hated her, said she just couldn't carry it anymore now that she had kids of her own, and thought about what it would mean if someone did this to her. I thanked her quietly and hung up. Then I sat in that kitchen for almost 2 hours without moving. I want to say I believed her right away, but the truth is I didn't. Not fully. I told myself people misremember things, that maybe Rachel had her facts twisted, that maybe this was some strange guilt spiral that had nothing to do with reality. But somewhere underneath that denial, a door had already creaked open, and pieces I hadn't looked at in years started drifting back into the light. I remembered how Melissa used to get strangely quiet in the days before every trip. I used to think it was just pre-vacation stress, packing lists and work handoffs. But now, I remembered the way she'd snap at small things, how she'd take calls in the bathroom with the fan running, how she'd come out with her eyes a little red and blame it on allergies. I remembered asking her once if I could tag along on one of those girls' weekends, just to surprise everyone, maybe rent a cabin nearby and let her have her time with the group but still see her in the evenings. She laughed it off so fast, said the whole point was for the girls to have their space, that it would be weird for a husband to show up. I remember feeling embarrassed for even suggesting it, like I'd broken some unspoken rule of trust between us. I remembered the way she'd come home from those trips almost giddy for the first day, and then oddly distant for the week after. I used to joke that vacation withdrawal was hitting her hard. I remembered the fights that would spark up out of nowhere right before she left. Arguments about nothing, dishes in the sink, a comment I made about her mother, things that never usually bothered her suddenly becoming full-blown conflicts. At the time, I thought marriage just had rough patches. Looking back, I wondered if those fights gave her an excuse to leave the house upset, to create distance before she got on a plane to be with somebody else. I didn't sleep that night. Around 3 a.m, I went into the closet and pulled down an old shoebox where I still kept some physical photos, ticket stubs, things from before everything went digital. I found photos from a few of those trips, printed ones Melissa had given me, because she said she liked having physical copies too. I looked closely at the backgrounds this time, not at her smiling face, but at the details around her. In one photo, supposedly from a lake house in Michigan, The tile pattern behind her looked distinctly like a hotel bathroom, not a rental cabin. I told myself I was reaching, that grief makes people see patterns that aren't there. Over the following weeks, I did something I never thought I'd do. I went back through old bank statements from those years, ones I still had archived from when we filed taxes jointly. I found charges for hotels in different cities than the ones she claimed to be in. A resort charge in Sedona the same week she said she was in Charleston with the girls. I found a florist charge 2 days after Valentine's Day one year, a year she told me she was surprising her mother with flowers. I remembered being touched by that story at the time, telling her what a good daughter she was. I sat with my laptop at 2 a.m, cross-referencing dates, feeling less like a heartbroken husband and more like a detective uncovering someone else's crime scene, except the someone else was the person I had shared a bed with for 6 years. I found an old group photo Melissa had posted years ago, one from a trip she said was just her and 3 college friends. I zoomed into the background at a table behind them. There was a man sitting there, his face partially turned, a hand resting near a woman's chair that I now recognized as Melissa's seat. I couldn't be certain it was him at first, but something about the posture felt familiar in a way that made my chest hurt. I reached out to Jennifer, the second friend Rachel had mentioned. I didn't accuse her of anything. I simply asked gently if we could talk. To my surprise, she agreed almost immediately, as if she too had been waiting years for someone to finally ask. Jennifer confirmed everything Rachel had said, though she added details I wasn't prepared for. She told me the affair had begun almost 2 years before Melissa ever mentioned divorce to me. She told me that the same week Melissa sat across from me at our kitchen table and said she didn't feel anything anymore, that love had simply faded, and it wasn't anyone's fault. She had already been planning a future with someone else. Jennifer said Melissa cried about it sometimes, said she felt trapped by her own lies, but never stopped long enough to actually end things honestly. It would have been easier, in some strange way, if she had just fallen out of love with me naturally. Instead, I learned the ending had been engineered long before she ever said the words out loud. What broke something in me wasn't jealousy of the other man. I barely knew him, barely cared to know him. What broke something in me was remembering all the times I defended Melissa to people who barely questioned her. All the times I thanked her friends for being there for her, for keeping her safe on those trips, for being such loyal, trustworthy people in her life. I had unknowingly thanked the very people who helped hide the truth from me. I had built my sense of stability on a foundation that never existed, and everyone around me except me had known it. I spent weeks in that strange, hollow space where grief and clarity live side by side. I wasn't grieving the marriage anymore. I had grieved that already, in my own way, back when it ended. This was different. This was grieving the version of the past I thought I had actually lived. I had to relearn 6 years of memories as something other than what I believed them to be. I never called Melissa during any of this. I never confronted her, never sent an angry message, never tried to expose her to mutual friends or make her feel the way I felt. I simply gathered what I needed to understand for myself, and once I understood it, I let it settle. Some people might call that weakness. I call it the only kind of power I had left, the power to not let her control one more chapter of my life, not even the chapter where I found out the truth. About 4 months after that first phone call from Rachel, Melissa reached out to me. It was a simple text at first, asking how I was doing, saying she'd been thinking about me, wondering if we could catch up sometime, maybe grab coffee like old friends do. I stared at that message for a long time before I decided to call her instead of texting back. She sounded happy to hear from me, warm even, like no time had passed. I let her talk for a minute, about her job, about some trip she was planning, and I noticed myself almost laughing at the irony of that word trip and how differently I heard it now. When she finally asked how I'd really been, I told her the truth, calmly, without raising my voice. I told her I knew about the affair, about the trips, about Rachel and Jennifer covering for her for years. I told her the divorce itself never actually broke me the way people expected it to. What broke me was realizing she had taken something from me long before she ever asked for a divorce papers to be signed. She hadn't just stopped loving me. She had built years of my life around a lie and let me defend that lie to everyone I knew, including myself. There was silence on the other end, long enough that I almost thought the call had dropped. She started to apologize, her voice cracking, asking if we could talk more, if she could explain everything properly, if there was any way to make things right between us. I told her, gently but firmly, that I wished her well, genuinely, and that I hoped she found whatever peace she was looking for. Then I told her I needed to go. I ended the call, and a few seconds later, I blocked her number. I sat on my porch that evening with a cup of coffee going cold beside me, watching the sun drop behind the houses across the street. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel that familiar tightness in my chest when I thought about my marriage. I realized that closure isn't something someone else gives you by finally telling the truth or finally apologizing enough. Closure is something you build for yourself, brick by brick, once you stop waiting for someone else to hand it to you. I don't hate Melissa anymore. I don't think about the man she was with or the friends who lied to protect her secret. What I think about now is how much of my own strength I get to reclaim simply by choosing not to let their betrayal write the rest of my story. The biggest lie in my life wasn't that my marriage ended. It's that I once believed love fading quietly was the saddest way a marriage could end. Now I know there are far sadder ways, and I lived through one of them. But I also know I walked out the other side of it, still capable of trust, still capable of peace. And that, more than anything else, feels like the real ending to this story. If you've ever discovered a truth that rewrote everything you thought you knew about someone you loved, I'd like to hear how you found the strength to move forward. Drop your story in the comments below. And if this story moved you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more real, emotional stories like this one.